Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a single verse in the Quran that has been at the center of so much controversy. We're going to be looking at a source that offers a pretty radical linguistic retake on it, one that really challenges how it's been understood for a long, long time.
So let's just get right to it. This is the core question. For centuries, one very specific interpretation of a verse has been used to argue that the answer is yes. And, that reading has had some pretty profound and far-reaching implications. Okay, so here it is. This is the exact wording from a common translation that really fuels the whole debate. That last part, those who have not yet menstruated, is almost always taken to mean prepubescent girls. And that, right there, is why this is one of the most contentious verses in the entire text.
So you have to ask, right? How did this interpretation get so locked in? And maybe more importantly, is there actually another way to read the original text? The source we're looking at today says absolutely, and suggests we might have been misunderstanding the verse all along.
Well, the analysis we're exploring today argues that this common translation isn't actually coming from the Quran's own internal language. The idea is that these biological concepts, puberty, menstruation, were basically imported from outside the text, from later commentaries that were then projected back onto the original words.
So, how do you even begin to challenge such an established reading? Well, the source proposes a really strict method. You have to let the text define its own terms. The whole goal is to strip away all those external layers and treat the Quran as its own self-contained dictionary.
These are the ground rules for the analysis. And the main principle, the one everything else hangs on, is that the Quran has to be its own dictionary. That means no outside commentaries, no historical backstories. The meaning of a word has to be found consistently inside the text itself.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The entire argument, everything we're about to talk about, pivots on redefining one single critical Arabic word. This one word changes the whole game.
The word is al-mahid. Now, traditionally, it's understood to mean one thing and one thing only, menstruation. And if you accept that definition, well then the controversial interpretation of the verse seems pretty much unavoidable.
But the source material asks us to just hit pause on that common definition for a second. It asks a simple question. Does the Quran itself ever actually define this word for us? And if it does, what does it say?
And it turns out the answer is yes. The Quran does define al-mahid in another verse. It says it is adha. Now, adha is an Arabic word that doesn't mean blood or anything biological. It means a state of harm or an obstruction or a disturbance. It's a condition, not a bodily function.
This slide just lays it all out, crystal clear. You can see the core linguistic shift right here. The meaning moves from a very specific biological event, menstruation, to a much broader ethical condition, a state of turmoil, or even the violation of an agreement.
So once you have this new definition, this new key, what happens when you go back and try to unlock that original controversial verse? Well, as you can imagine, its meaning is completely reconstructed. The impact is huge.
And here's the direct result, side by side. On the left, there's that familiar controversial translation. But on the right, using the Quran's own definition, you get the source's reconstruction. And suddenly, the verse isn't about the biology of women at all, but about the relational states of dependence.
So, according to this new reading, the verse has nothing to do with age or puberty. It's actually outlining 3 different ethical situations you might find yourself in when dissolving an agreement with a dependent: those who are currently causing a disturbance, those who are past that stage, and those who haven't entered that state yet. It's all about their relational condition, not their biology.
Now, this single change doesn't just alter one verse. The source argues that it completely reframes the entire purpose of the chapter it's in, Surah 65, which is often called the chapter of divorce.
So, if you follow this linguistic analysis through, the chapter is suddenly not about any of these topics we thought it was. The source concludes that all of these common associations, divorce law, wives, child brides, are actually misinterpretations that all stem from getting that one key word, al-mahid, wrong.
So if it's not about all of that, what is it about? Well, it becomes something more like a universal guide to ethical separation. It's about how to justly and fairly manage the end of a commitment, especially with dependents who might have broken an agreement or become a destabilizing force.
And this also completely reframes the whole idea of waiting periods.
They're no longer about tracking a biological cycle. Instead, they become these periods of ethical evaluation, a time to assess a person's commitment, their stability, and their truthfulness, to make sure the outcome is just for everyone.
And so, in the end, this whole analysis leaves us with a really powerful, kind of mind-bending question. How can one single word completely change the meaning of, well, of everything? It really forces us to think about language, about interpretation, and how an entire legal and social framework can pivot on the definition of just one word.